The bullet hole in the bell tower window was no bigger than a dime, but Sergeant Maya Chen could see straight through it to the chaos unfolding 3 miles away. The morning sun caught the fractured glass, casting rainbow fragments across her weathered combat boots as she adjusted the scope on her Barrett M82A1. Below, in the valley carved between 2 mountain ranges, smoke billowed from what used to be the safest evacuation route out of Kandahar province. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Overwatch. This is Ground Team Alpha, crackled through her earpiece, the voice tight with controlled panic. We've got 37 civilians pinned down in the marketplace. Hostile sniper has us locked down from the eastern ridge. Cannot advance, cannot retreat. Request immediate assistance. Maya's fingers found the small jade Buddha hanging from her neck, a gift from her grandmother before her first deployment. The worn stone was smooth against her calloused fingertips, a reminder of the temple bells that used to wake her as a child in San Francisco's Chinatown. Now the only bells she heard were the ones ringing warnings of incoming mortar. Her scope, she could make out the figures huddled behind overturned market stalls. Women clutching children. An elderly man pressing a blood-soaked cloth against his shoulder. A teenage boy trying to shield his younger sister with nothing but his thin frame and fierce determination. The distance between them and safety might as well have been an ocean. Ground Team Alpha, this is Commander Rodriguez, came another voice through the radio network. We need that sniper eliminated. Who do we have with line of sight? Maya pressed her eye closer to the scope, scanning the eastern ridge methodically. The enemy position was well concealed among the rocky outcroppings, but she caught the glint of metal reflecting off a rifle barrel. Her heart rate slowed as she entered that familiar state of absolute focus, the place where time stretched thin, and every breath became deliberate. I can see the position, she whispered into her headset. Range approximately 1,800 meters. Wind speed variable, gusting from the southwest. Target is partially concealed behind limestone outcropping. The radio fell silent for a moment. Then she heard Rodriguez's voice again, but this time, he wasn't speaking directly to her. She could hear him talking to someone else, perhaps his second-in-command, Lieutenant Williams. Sir, that's an impossible shot, Williams was saying, his voice carrying clearly through the open channel. 1,800 meters in these wind conditions? Through that terrain? I don't think any of our boys can make that. They asked who could make that shot, Rodriguez replied, and Maya could hear the weight of command in his voice, the burden of 37 lives hanging in the balance. There was a pause, and then his voice carried a note of something that might have been pride, or perhaps simply faith built through 2 years of watching her work. The commander pointed up and said she can. Maya felt the familiar flutter in her chest, not nervousness, but the peculiar mix of honor and pressure that came with being the only woman sniper in her unit. She had heard the whispers when she first arrived. Too small, too quiet, too much of a risk. But Rodriguez had seen something in her that others missed, and now 37 lives depended on whether his faith had been well placed. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of dust and cordite, and something else, jasmine flowers from the garden behind the mosque, where the civilians had been shopping for their weekly groceries when the attack began. Maya had walked through that same marketplace just 3 days ago, buying oranges from a vendor who smiled despite having lost 2 sons in the fighting. The vendor's wife had pressed an extra orange into Maya's hands, refusing payment, her eyes crinkling with the kind of warmth that transcends language. Now that same vendor was probably among those trapped figures, waiting for someone to take. An impossible shot. Maya shifted her position slightly, feeling the rough stone of the bell tower scrape against her elbow. This tower had stood for over 200 years, built by French missionaries who had come to this valley with dreams of peace. The bells had once called people to prayer, to celebration, to community. Now it served as her sniper's nest, its ancient stones absorbing the vibrations of distant explosions. The enemy sniper fired again, and Maya watched through her scope as one of the market stalls exploded in a shower of wood and fabric. A woman's scream carried across the distance, thin and sharp as a blade. Maya's jaw tightened. She had been in this position before. One shot, one chance. Everything riding on her ability to calculate wind speed, bullet drop, and target movement. In the space between heartbeats, but this shot was different. The distance was at the extreme edge of what was possible with her rifle. The wind was gusting unpredictably through the mountain passes, and the target was positioned in such a way that she would have maybe 3 inches of exposed surface to aim for. A gap between 2 rocks where the enemy sniper's shoulder became visible when he adjusted his position. "Overwatch do you have?" "The shot?" Rodriguez's voice was steady, but Maya could hear the underlying tension. Every second that passed meant another chance for the enemy to eliminate one of those civilians. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the rhythm of her own heartbeat, listening to the whisper of wind across the valley. Her grandmother had taught her to find stillness in chaos, to hear the silence between the temple bells. In that silence, her grandmother used to say, "You will find the truth of what you must do." The truth was that this shot would define her career, possibly her entire life. Make it, and she would save 37 innocent people, while eliminating a threat that had been terrorizing this region for weeks. Miss it, and her position would be compromised. The enemy would know exactly where she was, and those civilians would likely die while she became the next target. She opened her eyes and pressed her cheek against the rifle stock, feeling the familiar cool touch of the metal. Through the scope, she could see the enemy sniper's position clearly now. He was good, patient, well concealed, and ruthless enough to target civilians to draw out coalition forces. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had established a pattern. Every 47 seconds, he shifted slightly to scan different sections of the marketplace. For just a moment during that shift, his shoulder became visible. Maya began her countdown, breathing slowly and deeply. 47 seconds. 46. 40-5. The wind gusted again, and she adjusted her aim slightly to compensate. In her peripheral vision, she could see movement in the valley below. Ground Team Alpha was trying to find better cover, but their options were limited. The marketplace was essentially a killing field, surrounded by open ground on 3 sides. 30 seconds. 29. 20-8. Her finger found the trigger, and she began to apply pressure slowly, steadily. This was the moment where everything else fell away. The radio chatter, the distant explosions, even her own heartbeat seemed to slow to nothing. There was only the crosshairs, the target, and the mathematics of death delivered at 1,800 meters. 15 seconds. 14. 13. Through her scope, she saw the enemy sniper begin his shift. His shoulder appeared in the gap between the rocks, exactly as she had predicted. Maya held her breath, made a final microscopic adjustment for wind drift, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with tremendous force, the sound of the gunshot echoing off the ancient bell tower walls like thunder. For a split second, Maya lost sight of the target as the rifle's recoil threw off her scope alignment. She quickly reacquired the target area, her heart hammering as she waited to see the result. The enemy sniper's rifle tumbled from his position, clattering down the rocky slope. The figure behind the rocks slumped and went still. "Target down," Maya whispered into her headset, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. "Hostile sniper eliminated." The radio erupted in cheers from Ground Team Alpha, but Maya barely heard them. She was already scanning the area for additional threats, her training keeping her focused even as relief flooded through her system. Through her scope, she watched as the trapped civilians began to move, guided by Ground Team Alpha toward the evacuation route. But something was wrong. Maya caught movement on a different section of the eastern ridge, a second sniper position that hadn't been there before, or had been so well concealed that even her careful reconnaissance had missed it. Her blood turned to ice as she realized the enemy had been using the first sniper as bait, drawing out coalition forces while a second shooter moved into an even better position. "Ground Team Alpha, second hostile position identified," she said, urgently into her radio. "North-northeast of your position, approximately 2,000 meters. Do not advance. Repeat, do not advance." But it was too late. The civilians were already moving across the open ground, and the second enemy sniper had a perfect angle on the evacuation route. Maya watched in horror as the rifle muzzle swung toward the group of fleeing villagers, the crosshairs settling on the teenage boy who was still trying to protect his little sister. This second shot would be even more difficult than the first, longer range, more difficult angle, and a target that was almost completely concealed. Worse, Maya would have to take the shot while the enemy sniper was actively aiming at civilians, which meant she had perhaps 5 seconds before he pulled his own trigger. The boy stumbled, his sister clinging to his arm as they ran across the dusty marketplace. Maya could see the terror in their faces even at this distance, could see the way the girl kept looking back toward the market stalls where she had probably been buying candy, just minutes before her world turned into a nightmare. Maya's finger was already on the trigger, her scope aligned as closely as possible with the barely visible target. This time, there would be no countdown, no careful breathing exercises, no time to calculate every variable. This would come down to instinct, training, and whatever grace the universe might choose to grant to 2 children who had done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The jade Buddha pressed against her chest as she held her breath and began to squeeze the trigger, knowing that the next few seconds would determine whether she saved 2 more lives or watched helplessly as innocents died in a marketplace that once smelled of jasmine and oranges. The morning sun continued to stream through the bullet hole in the bell tower window, casting its rainbow fragments across her boots as Maya Chen prepared to take the most important shot of her life. Maya Chen had not always been a sniper. She had not always been a soldier. She had not always been the woman who could make impossible shots from ancient bell towers while children ran for their lives in distant marketplaces. Once, she had been a girl who was afraid of loud noises, who jumped at the sound of firecrackers. During Chinese New Year celebrations in San Francisco's Chinatown, her grandmother, Popo, used to find her hiding under the kitchen table during the festivities, small hands pressed over her ears while dragons danced in the streets outside their apartment above the herb shop. "Xiao Bao," Popo would whisper, using the pet name. That meant little dumpling. The noise cannot hurt you, but the silence between the sounds, that is where you must learn to live. Maya had never understood what her grandmother meant until she was 23 years old, lying prone on a rooftop in Fallujah, watching insurgents through a rifle scope for the first time. In that moment, between the chaos of urban warfare and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat, she had found the silence Popo had tried to teach her about. It was a place of absolute clarity, where fear transformed into focus and trembling hands became steady as stone. Now, at 28, Maya carried that silence with her everywhere. It lived in the careful way she cleaned her rifle each morning, methodically removing each component and inspecting it for the smallest flaw. It lived in the letters she wrote home but never sent, pages and pages of words that tried to explain what it meant to hold life and death in the space between a trigger and a heartbeat. Most of all, it lived in the moments like this one, when time stretched thin and the whole world narrowed to the width of crosshairs. Aligned on a target who didn't know death was looking at him. The second sniper's rifle was swinging toward the fleeing civilians, and Maya could see his finger beginning to tighten on the trigger. She squeezed her own trigger in that same instant, sending a .50 caliber round racing across 2,000 meters of mountain air. through wind currents and heat distortions and all the invisible forces that could turn a perfect shot into a tragic miss. The enemy sniper jerked backward, his rifle discharging harmlessly into the sky as Maya's bullet found its mark. Through her scope, she watched him tumble down the rocky slope, his body coming to rest in a tangle of loose stones and scrub brush. The teenage boy and his sister continued running, completely unaware that death had passed within inches of them. Second. Target down, Maya reported, her voice still that same steady monotone that had become her trademark. But inside, her heart was racing with the particular combination of relief and emptiness that followed every successful kill. She had saved lives today, but she had also ended them, and the mathematics of that exchange never quite balanced in. Her mind. Ground Team Alpha successfully evacuated all 37 civilians, and Maya remained in the bell tower for another 6 hours, providing overwatch while engineers cleared the marketplace of improvised explosive devices. It was routine work after the drama of the morning, but Maya welcomed the routine. It gave her time to think, time to process what had happened, time to carefully pack away the emotions that combat stirred up until she could examine them safely in private. When her relief finally arrived, Sergeant Martinez with his easy smile and steady hands, Maya climbed down from the bell tower feeling older than her 28 years. The ancient stone steps were worn smooth by 2 centuries of feet, missionaries and soldiers and local villagers who had climbed these same stairs. For prayer, for safety, for the simple human need to see farther than the horizon. Hell of a day, Chen, Martinez said as they walked back toward the forward operating base. Rodriguez is putting you up for another commendation. 2 confirmed kills at extreme range, 37 civilians saved. That's the kind of thing that makes careers. Maya nodded but didn't respond. Commendations and career advancement felt abstract to her, like items in someone else's personnel file. What felt real was the weight of her rifle across her back, the jade Buddha against her chest, and the memory of those 2 children running across the marketplace with terror written in every line of their bodies. Back at the FOB, Maya went through her evening routine with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else. She cleaned her rifle completely, checking each component twice before reassembly. She updated her shooting log, recording wind conditions, temperature, humidity, and the precise details of both shots. She wrote a brief after-action report for Rodriguez, keeping her language clinical and professional. Only then did she allow herself to sit on her narrow cot and open the small wooden box where she kept her most precious possessions. Inside were letters from home, photographs, and a collection of small objects that helped her remember who she had been before. She learned to kill people from very far away. There was a fortune cookie message from her 18th birthday. You will find your calling in unexpected places. There was a ticket stub from the baseball game where her father had tried to teach her to keep statistics, insisting that mathematics could make sense of anything if you applied it correctly. There was a pressed flower from her high school graduation bouquet, the day she had announced to her parents that she was joining the Army instead of going to UC Berkeley, like they had planned. That conversation had not gone well. Her father, a mathematics professor who believed in logical solutions to every problem, could not understand why his daughter would choose war over education. Her mother, who had fled Vietnam as a child, could not understand why anyone would willingly return to the world of violence she had spent her life trying to escape. You don't know what war really is, her mother had said, tears streaming down her face as Maya signed her enlistment papers. You think it's like the movies, like there are good guys and bad guys and everything makes sense in the end. But war just breaks things, Maya. It breaks everything it touches. Her mother had been both right and wrong. War did break things. Maya had seen enough destroyed buildings, ruined lives, and shattered families to understand that truth intimately. But it also revealed things, uncovered strengths and purposes that might never have been discovered in peacetime. Maya had found her calling in the space between heartbeats, in the silence between gunshots, in the mathematical precision required to save lives by ending them. She took out her phone and started to compose a text to her parents, as she did every few days. Safe and well, weather is hot, missing Popo's dumplings. Simple words that revealed nothing about sniper positions, or impossible shots, or the weight of 37. Lives hanging in the balance of wind calculations and trigger pressure. Her parents texted back within minutes, as they always did. Her father, proud of you, come home safe. Her mother, made dumplings today, froze some for when you come home. Popo would be proud too. The mention of her grandmother brought tears to Maya's eyes. Popo had died during Maya's second deployment, passing peacefully in her sleep while Maya was 3,000 miles away, unable to say goodbye or light incense at the temple or perform any of the rituals that might have eased her spirit into whatever came next. Maya had learned about her grandmother's death through a Red Cross message, delivered by a chaplain who meant well but couldn't understand why a trained killer would break down sobbing at the news that an elderly woman had died of natural causes. But Popo had been more than Maya's grandmother. She had been her teacher, her anchor, the person who helped her understand that strength could coexist with gentleness, that silence could contain more wisdom than all the noise in the world. The last conversation they had was over a scratchy satellite connection, Popo's voice fading in and out as she tried to tell Maya something important about the Jade Buddha, about the prayers she said every morning for her granddaughter's safety, about the way love could travel across any distance if you knew how to send it properly. The Buddha protects, but you must also protect yourself, Popo had said. Not just your body, Xiaobao, your heart, your spirit. The things that make you who you are. War will try to take these from you, but you must not let it. You must remember the girl who was afraid of firecrackers, who hid under the kitchen table. She is still there inside you, and she is the reason you fight. Maya touched the Jade Buddha now, feeling its familiar weight and smoothness. Sometimes she wondered if her grandmother had known, somehow, that her granddaughter would become a sniper, that she would spend her days looking through rifle scopes at people who had no idea death was watching them. Popo had never asked for details about Maya's work, never pressed for specifics about what she did or how many people she had killed. But she always seemed to know when Maya was struggling, when the weight of taking lives was becoming too heavy to carry alone. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Chun, you in there?" Rodriguez's voice, tired but kind. "Yes, sir, come in." Rodriguez entered, looking more like a concerned father than a military commander. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee and a manila folder that probably contained paperwork related to the day's mission. "Thought you might want to see this," he said, handing her the folder along with one of the coffee cups. "Intelligence report came in about an hour ago. Those 2 snipers you took out today, they were responsible for at least 18 civilian casualties over the past 3 weeks. They'd been systematically targeting anyone who tried to use that marketplace." Maya opened the folder and scanned the intelligence summary. Photographs of the 2 dead snipers, their weapons and equipment, maps showing their previous positions and confirmed kills. The clinical language of military intelligence made it all sound abstract, but Maya could read between the lines. 18 dead civilians meant 18 families destroyed, 18 futures erased, 18 sets of dreams and hopes and fears that would never be fulfilled. "You saved more than 37 lives today," Rodriguez continued. "Those 2 bastards would have kept killing until someone stopped them. And the only person who could make those shots was you." Maya nodded, but she wasn't sure how she felt about the mathematics of heroism. Did saving 55 lives, 37 today, plus 18 previous victims, justify the 2 lives she had taken? Did the algebra of war work that way, with deaths on one side of the equation, balancing out lives saved on the other? "There's something else," Rodriguez said, and his tone shifted slightly. The family of that boy and girl you saw running. They asked Ground Team Alpha to pass along a message. They wanted to thank whoever made those shots. The boy's name is Ahmed, and his sister is Fatima. He's 14, she's 8. They were buying supplies for their mother, who's pregnant with her 3rd child. Maya's coffee cup trembled slightly in her hands. Having names made it different, made the mathematics more complicated. Ahmed and Fatima weren't just figures running across her rifle scope anymore. They were children with a pregnant mother, with lives and stories and reasons for being in that marketplace at that particular moment. They don't know it was you specifically. Rodriguez added, as far as they know, it could have been any of our snipers. But I thought you should know that what you did today will ripple forward in ways you might not expect. Ahmed wants to be a doctor when he grows up. Fatima wants to be a teacher. Because of you, they'll have the chance to find out if those dreams come true. After Rodriguez left, Maya sat alone in her small room, holding the jade Buddha and thinking about ripples. Popo had taught her that every action creates circles that spread outward like stones thrown into still water, touching shores that might be miles away from where the stone first broke the surface. Maya had thrown her stones today, too. Bullets that traveled across impossible distances to find their targets with lethal precision. The ripples from those stones would spread in directions she couldn't predict or control. Ahmed might indeed become a doctor, might save hundreds of lives over the course of his career. Or the trauma of today might follow him forever, might shape him in ways that prevented him from ever feeling safe enough to pursue his dreams. Fatima might become a teacher, might spend her life helping other children learn to read and write and dream of better futures. Or she might carry the memory of running in terror through a marketplace, might never again feel comfortable in crowded spaces or unexpected loud noises. Maya opened her laptop and began typing another letter she would never send. This one addressed to Ahmed and Fatima, 2 children who would never know her name, but who would remain connected to her forever by the thread of a moment. When time stopped and bullets found their marks and lives were saved by mathematics and training and whatever grace allows some. Shots to fly true while others miss by inches. Dear Ahmed and Fatima, she wrote, today I watched you run across a marketplace, and I have never seen anyone braver. You probably don't remember me, you couldn't have known I was there, watching from a bell tower while you took care of each other, but I will remember you for the rest of my life. She wrote about their courage, about the way Ahmed had protected his sister, about the determination in their faces as they ran toward safety. She wrote about her grandmother's teachings, about finding silence in chaos and strength in gentleness. She wrote about the weight of protecting people you've never met, the strange intimacy of watching someone's life hang in the balance while they remain completely unaware of your existence. Most of all, she wrote about her hope that they would pursue their dreams of becoming a doctor and a teacher, that the trauma of today would not define the rest of their lives, that somewhere in the ripples spreading out from this moment, there would be healing and growth, and the kind of peace that her grandmother had tried to teach her to find in the silence between sounds. When she finished writing, Maya saved the letter in a folder with dozens of others, messages to people she had saved, to families of people she had killed, to the parts of herself that remained afraid of loud noises and still sometimes wanted to hide under kitchen tables when the world became too much to bear. Tomorrow, there would be another mission, another sniper position, another moment when life and death balanced on the edge of crosshairs and trigger pressure. But tonight, Maya Chen sat in a small room on a forward operating base in Afghanistan, holding a jade Buddha and remembering that she was still, underneath all the training and experience and reputation, the girl who had learned to find silence in chaos and strength in the spaces between heartbeats. Outside her window, she could hear the night sounds of the fob generators humming, guards walking their rounds, distant conversations in a dozen different languages. But inside her room, in the space she had learned to create around herself, There was only silence and the knowledge that today she had thrown 2 stones into still water, and the ripples were still spreading. 3 months after the marketplace incident, Maya found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about right and wrong, about the clean lines between enemy and ally, about the mathematics of justice in a war that seemed to have no clear answers. The letter from Ahmed and Fatima's family, delivered through Red Cross channels and translated into careful English, sat on her desk like evidence of a world she was no longer sure she understood. "Dear American soldier," the letter began, "we do not know your name, but we know you saved our children. Ahmed speaks of becoming a doctor to help people as you helped him. Fatima draws pictures of angels with rifles, protecting children in marketplaces. We pray for you every day and hope you will come home safe to your family. Your friend always, Halil Nazari." Maya had read the letter 50 times, studying each word as carefully as she analyzed wind patterns and bullet trajectories. The idea that Fatima drew pictures of angels with rifles both warmed and troubled her. She had become someone's guardian angel, but angels weren't supposed to kill people, even to save other people. Angels weren't supposed to lie awake at night calculating the precise angle and wind speed required to put bullets through human skulls. The moral complexity of her situation became even more tangled when Lieutenant Colonel Harrison arrived at the FOB with new orders and a classified briefing that would change everything. Maya thought she knew about her mission in Afghanistan. Harrison was career military, the kind of officer who wore his ribbons like armor and spoken acronyms that turned human beings into strategic assets. He gathered the senior staff in the briefing room on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, but ended with Maya questioning whether she was still fighting for the right side. "Intelligence has identified a high-value target," Harrison began, clicking through satellite photographs on a laptop connected to a portable projector. Dr. Rashid Mahmoud, known to local populations as the teacher, he's been operating the school for girls in the Panjshir Valley, ostensibly providing education in mathematics and literature. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. In her experience, when briefings began with words like ostensibly, they usually ended with orders to shoot someone who didn't deserve to be shot. However, Harrison continued, recent intelligence suggests that Dr. Mahmoud is using the school as a cover for insurgent activities. He's allegedly recruiting female suicide bombers, using his position as an educator to radicalize young women and turn them into weapons against coalition forces. The photographs on the wall showed a bearded man in his 60s, standing outside a simple stone building with a hand-painted sign in Darien English, "Panjshir Valley Girls School, Knowledge is Light." In one image, he was surrounded by a dozen girls ranging in age from perhaps 8 to 16, all wearing headscarves and holding books, all smiling at the camera with the particular brightness that comes from learning something new. Maya studied the faces in the photograph, looking for signs of radicalization, of fear, of coercion. But all she saw were children who looked remarkably similar to her memories of Fatima, bright-eyed and hopeful, standing next to a teacher who looked proud of their accomplishments. "Sir," Rodriguez spoke up, "what's our level of confidence in this intelligence?" "Dr. Mahmoud has been operating that school for over 15 years. The girls he's taught have gone on to become nurses, teachers, even government workers in Kabul. That doesn't sound like a terrorist recruitment program." Harrison's expression hardened. "The intelligence comes from multiple sources, Sergeant. We have intercepted communications suggesting that at least 3 female suicide bombers who have targeted coalition forces in the past 6 months received training at Mahmoud's school. We also have reports of suspicious activity around the school building, unusual foot traffic at night, meetings that don't appear on any official schedule." Maya raised her hand. "Sir, what kind of communications? And who are these sources?" "That's classified above your pay grade, Sergeant Chen," Harrison replied sharply. Your job is not to evaluate intelligence. Your job is to eliminate targets when ordered to do so. The room fell silent. Maya had never been spoken to that way by a superior officer, and she could see Rodriguez's jaw tighten with suppressed anger. But Harrison continued as if nothing had happened. Dr. Mahmoud has been designated a Level 1 target for immediate elimination. The school building will be destroyed via airstrike after the target is confirmed dead. Sergeant Chen, you will establish a sniper position on Hill 394, approximately 900 meters from the school. Target elimination is scheduled for Thursday morning at 0800 hours, when Dr. Mahmoud typically arrives for the first class of the day. Maya felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. Sir, what about the students? If we're striking the school building, the building will be empty, Harrison cut her off. We've confirmed that classes don't begin until 0900 hours. The target will be alone in the building, preparing for his day of radicalizing young women. But Maya had studied the photographs carefully, and something didn't add up. Sir, in these surveillance photos, I can see students arriving as early as 0730. Some of them appear to help with setup and preparation. Are we certain the building will be empty? Harrison's face flushed red. Sergeant Chen, I'm beginning to question your commitment to this mission. Are you refusing a direct order? No, sir. I'm asking for clarification to ensure minimal civilian casualties, which is standard protocol for any engagement. Rodriguez stepped forward. Sir, Sergeant Chen's questions are legitimate. If there's any possibility of civilian casualties, especially children, we need to adjust our operational parameters. The operational parameters have been set by people with access to intelligence you don't possess, Harrison snapped. This target represents an immediate threat to coalition forces and Afghan civilians alike. Every day we delay means more young women are turned into human weapons. The mission proceeds as planned. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the photograph of Dr. Mahmoud, surrounded by his students, all of them holding books and smiling. She thought about Fatima drawing pictures of angels with rifles, about the letter from her father expressing gratitude to the unknown American soldier who had saved his children. She thought about her grandmother's teachings about the silence between sounds, about finding clarity in chaos. But this time, the silence offered no guidance, only more questions that seemed to have no good answers. Maya slipped out of her quarters and made her way to the communications tent, where she knew Sergeant Williams would be monitoring overnight radio traffic. Williams was a good soldier and a better friend, someone who had earned Maya's trust over 2 years of shared deployments and late-night conversations about the moral complexities of their work. Williams, she said quietly, sliding into the tent. I need a favor. He looked up from his radio equipment, noting the tension in her voice. What kind of favor, Chen? I need you to run a background check on someone. Unofficial. Off the books. Williams glanced around to make sure they were alone. This about the school target? Maya nodded. Something doesn't feel right about this whole thing. I've been studying the intelligence photos, and I can't find any evidence of suspicious activity. No unusual foot traffic, no meetings that don't look like normal parent-teacher conferences. Nothing that suggests this guy is anything other than what he appears to be. You think Harrison's intelligence is wrong? I think Harrison's intelligence might be fabricated. Williams let out a low whistle. That's a serious accusation, Chen. If you're wrong, if I'm wrong, then I've wasted a few hours of your time running a background check. If I'm right, then I'm about to kill an innocent man and possibly some children, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. Williams nodded slowly. What do you need? Everything you can find on Dr. Rashid Mahmoud. Real name, education, family history, any connections to insurgent groups or terrorist activities. Also, see if you can find any information about the 3 female suicide bombers Harrison mentioned. Names, backgrounds, whether they actually attended the school. That's going to take some time. And I'll need to access databases I'm not supposed to touch. I know, and Williams? If anyone asks, this conversation never happened. The next morning brought news that made Maya's stomach churn with dread. A convoy carrying medical supplies to a rural clinic had been attacked by insurgents, and 2 American soldiers had been killed by a female suicide bomber who appeared to be no more than 16 years old. This is exactly why we need to eliminate the target, Harrison announced during the morning briefing. That bomber was trained somewhere, radicalized by someone. Dr. Mahmoud's school is the most likely candidate. But Maya had been studying the attack reports, and something troubled her about the timing. The suicide bomber had struck at exactly 0730 hours, which was the same time Harrison claimed Dr. Mahmoud's students began arriving at school. If she had been at the school, she couldn't have been carrying out a suicide attack 30 miles away. Maya found Williams in the mess tent 2 hours later, looking tired and troubled. "What did you find?" she asked quietly. "You're not going to like it," he said, sliding a folder across the table. Dr. Rashid Mahmoud is exactly who he appears to be. Ph.D. in mathematics from Kabul University, taught secondary school for 20 years before opening the girls' school. His wife died of cancer in 2003, and he's dedicated his life to ensuring girls in the region have access to education, no connections to insurgent groups, no suspicious financial transactions, nothing that suggests terrorist activity. Maya opened the folder and studied the documents Williams had assembled. Birth certificate, education records, employment history, even testimonials from former students who had gone on to become teachers and nurses and government workers. "What about the suicide bombers?" Williams shook his head. "That's where it gets interesting. I could only find information on 2 of the 3 bombers Harrison mentioned. Neither of them had any connection to Mahmoud's school. One was from Helmand province, the other from Kandahar. The 3rd bomber? I can't find any record of her existence in any database." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that either this 3rd bomber is so deeply classified that her information has been scrubbed from every system I can access, or she doesn't exist. And if she doesn't exist, then Harrison's entire justification for this mission is based on fabricated intelligence." Maya stared at the documents, her mind racing through the implications. If Williams was right, then she was being ordered to assassinate an innocent man whose only crime was teaching girls to read and write. But if she refused the order, she would face court-martial and possibly prison time. And if she went through with it, she would have to live with the knowledge that she had murdered a teacher and possibly some of his students. "There's something else," Williams said quietly. "I did some digging into Harrison's background. This isn't his first questionable target designation. He was involved in a similar incident in Iraq 3 years ago, ordered the elimination of a Sunni tribal leader who was allegedly supporting insurgents. Turned out the tribal leader was actually working to broker peace negotiations between different factions. Harrison's intelligence was wrong then too. What happened to Harrison after that? Nothing. The tribal leader's death derailed the peace negotiations and led to 6 months of increased violence. But Harrison's superiors accepted his explanation that he had acted on the best available intelligence. He was transferred to a different unit and eventually promoted. Maya closed the folder, her hands trembling slightly. So Harrison has a history of manufacturing intelligence to justify questionable killings, and now he's doing it again. That's what it looks like to me. But Chun, you need to understand something. Even if we're right about this, proving it is going to be almost impossible. Harrison has classified intelligence sources that we can't access. If you refuse this mission based on our investigation, it's going to be your word against his, and he's a lieutenant colonel while you're a sergeant. Maya nodded, understanding the impossible position she was in. The military hierarchy that had protected her and given her purpose for 5 Years was now demanding that she do something that violated every principle she believed in. But refusing the order would destroy her career and possibly land her in prison, while carrying it out would make her a murderer. That afternoon, Maya made her way to Hill 394 to conduct reconnaissance for the following day's mission. The elevation provided a clear view of the Panjshir Valley Girls' School, which looked even more innocent from 900 meters than it had in the surveillance photographs. It was a simple stone building with bright blue doors and windows, surrounded by a small garden where someone had planted sunflowers and tomatoes. Through her rifle scope, Maya watched Dr. Mahmoud arrive at the school at exactly 7:30 a.m., just as the intelligence reports had indicated. But what the reports had failed to mention was that he wasn't alone. 3 students accompanied him, young women who appeared to be helping him prepare the classroom for the day's lessons. Maya watched as they swept the floors, arranged desks, and wrote mathematical equations on a blackboard. She watched Dr. Mahmoud patiently help one of the students work through a difficult problem, his weathered hands gently guiding her pencil as she struggled with the calculations. At 8 a.m., the exact time Harrison had designated for the assassination, the school building contained not just Dr. Mahmoud, but also 3 students, ages approximately 14 to 17. If Maya took the shot as ordered, she would be killing not just an innocent teacher, but also 3 young women whose only crime was arriving early to help prepare their classroom. Maya's radio crackled to life. Overwatch, this is command. Target is in position. You are cleared to engage. Maya's finger found the trigger, but she couldn't bring herself to apply pressure. Through her scope, she watched Dr. Mahmoud point to something on the blackboard, explaining a mathematical concept to his eager students. One of the girls laughed at something he said, the sound carrying clearly across the 900 meters that separated them. Overwatch, this is command. You are cleared to engage. Acknowledge, Maya keyed her radio. Command, this is Overwatch. I have eyes on target, but there are civilians in the building. 3 female students, ages 14 to 17. Request permission to delay until building is clear. Negative, Overwatch. Intelligence confirms building should be empty at this time. Take the shot. Command, I can see the civilians through my scope. They are definitely present and in the line of fire. Overwatch, you will engage the target immediately. That is a direct order. Maya's hands began to shake. She had never disobeyed a direct order in 5 years of military service, but she had also never been ordered to kill innocent children. Through her scope, she watched one of the students, a girl who reminded her painfully of Fatima, carefully copy equations from the blackboard into her notebook. Overwatch, this is command. If you do not engage the target in the next 60 seconds, you will be relieved of duty and face immediate court-martial. Maya closed her eyes, trying to find the silence her grandmother had taught her about, the clarity that had guided her through every previous mission. But this time, the silence was filled with the voices of everyone she had saved and everyone she had killed, all of them asking her the same question. What kind of person do you choose to be when no one is watching except yourself? She opened her eyes and keyed her radio one final time. Command, this is Overwatch. I cannot take this shot. There are civilians in the building, and I will not fire on a school. The radio exploded with angry voices, Harrison screaming about insubordination, Rodriguez trying to calm the situation, other voices demanding explanations and threatening consequences. But Maya barely heard them. She was watching Dr. Mahmoud and his students through her rifle scope, memorizing their faces, knowing that she had just ended her military career to protect people who would never know her name. 15 minutes later, she heard the unmistakable sound of approaching helicopters. Apache gunships, armed with Hellfire missiles that would reduce the school building to rubble regardless of who was inside. Maya watched in horror as the helicopters took up position, their weapon systems locking onto the target she had refused to eliminate. All stations, this is Air Command, came a new voice over the radio. Target building is designated for immediate destruction. All ground personnel maintain safe distance. Maya keyed her radio frantically. Air Command, there are civilians in the building. 4 people, including 3 children. Ground station, this is Air Command. We show negative human signatures in target building. Engaging target in 30 seconds. Maya realized with growing horror that Harrison had found a way to complete his mission despite her refusal. The Apache pilots were either using faulty intelligence or deliberately ignoring her warnings about civilians. Either way, Dr. Mahmoud and his students were about to die, and there was nothing she could do to stop it, except there was one thing she could do. Maya swung her rifle around, abandoning the school target and instead focusing on the lead Apache helicopter. She couldn't destroy the aircraft with her rifle, but she could disable its targeting systems, force it to abort the mission. It would be an act of treason, firing on American aircraft, but it might be the only way to save 4 innocent lives. Through her scope, Maya could see the helicopter's targeting sensors, the delicate electronic equipment that guided its missiles to their targets. One well-placed shot could disable the sensors without harming the crew, forcing them to return to base without completing their mission. Maya's finger tightened on the trigger as she made the most important decision of her life. She was about to fire on her own military to protect a teacher and 3 students who were about to be murdered based on fabricated intelligence. She was about to become a traitor to save innocents, knowing that the consequences would follow her for the rest of her life. The helicopters moved into final attack position, their missiles armed and ready. Dr. Mahmoud and his students continued their lesson, completely unaware that death was approaching from the sky at 300 miles per hour. Maya held her breath, found her target, and squeezed the trigger. 50 caliber round struck the Apache's targeting sensor array with surgical precision, sending sparks cascading from the helicopter's nose as critical electronics failed in a shower of destroyed circuitry. Maya watched through her scope as the pilot fought to maintain control, the aircraft lurching sideways as warning lights flooded the cockpit. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Eagle 1, crackled through Maya's radio headset. "We are taking hostile fire from unknown position. Targeting systems are down. Aborting mission and returning to base." Maya lowered her rifle, her hands trembling with the magnitude of what she had just done. She had fired on American aircraft to protect Afghan civilians, crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. In military terms, she had just committed an act of treason. In human terms, she had prevented the murder of 4 innocent people. Through her scope, she watched Dr. Mahmoud and his students continue their lesson, still blissfully unaware of how close they had come to death. The girl who reminded her of Fatima was now at the blackboard, working through a mathematical equation while her teacher offered gentle guidance. Maya's radio erupted in chaos. Harrison's voice screaming about traitors and court-martial proceedings. Rodriguez demanding to know what was happening. Air traffic control trying to coordinate the emergency landing of a damaged Apache helicopter. And underneath it all, a new voice that Maya didn't recognize, calm, authoritative, and very angry. "All stations, this is General Morrison. Cease all operations immediately. I am taking direct command of this situation. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison. You will report to my location immediately. Sergeant Chen, you will maintain your position until relieved." Maya had never heard of General Morrison, but something in his tone suggested that Harrison's fabricated intelligence mission was about to face serious scrutiny. She settled in to wait, keeping her scope trained on the school building to ensure that no other aircraft attempted to complete the aborted strike. 2 hours later, Maya heard footsteps on the rocky path leading up Hill 394. She turned to see Rodriguez approaching, accompanied by an older man in general stars whom she assumed was Morrison. Behind them came 2 military police officers and a woman in civilian. clothes carrying a thick folder of documents. "Sergeant Chen," Rodriguez said as they reached her position. "This is General Morrison and Sarah Crawford from the Defense Intelligence Agency. They need to ask you some questions." Maya stood and saluted, her rifle still slung across her shoulder. "Sir, ma'am." General Morrison returned her salute, then studied her with sharp gray eyes that seemed to see more than they revealed. "Sergeant Chen, you've created quite a situation here. Firing on American aircraft is typically considered an act of treason." "Yes, sir. I understand the charges I'm facing. However," Morrison continued, "before we discuss your actions, I need to understand what led you to take such an extreme step. Ms. Crawford has some information that might be relevant." Sarah Crawford opened her folder and pulled out a series of photographs and documents. "Sergeant Chen, we've been investigating Lieutenant Colonel Harrison for several months. His pattern of falsifying intelligence to justify questionable target eliminations first came to our attention after the incident in Iraq that resulted in the death of a tribal leader who was working toward peace negotiations." Maya felt a surge of vindication mixed with dread. Her investigation with Williams had been correct, but the fact that Harrison was already under investigation raised uncomfortable questions about why he had been allowed to continue operating. "We've been building a case against Harrison," Crawford continued, "but we needed evidence of him actually attempting to carry out an assassination based on fabricated intelligence. Your refusal to take the shot and subsequent actions to prevent the helicopter strike have provided us with exactly the evidence we needed." Morrison stepped forward. "Sergeant Chen, everything you did today was being monitored and recorded. Your radio communications, your refusal to fire on civilians, your decision to disable the Apache's targeting systems, all of it will serve as evidence against Harrison." Maya stared at them in disbelief. "Sir, are you saying this was all a setup?" "Not exactly," Morrison replied. "Harrison's mission was real, and he would have killed Dr. Mahmoud and those students if you had followed his orders. But we suspected he was operating with fabricated intelligence, and we needed proof. Your actions today provided that proof while also saving 4 innocent lives." Crawford pulled out another document. "We've confirmed that Dr. Rashid Mahmoud is exactly what he appears to be, a mathematics teacher, dedicated to educating girls in a region where such education is often discouraged or forbidden. The intelligence Harrison used to justify this mission was completely fabricated. The 3 female suicide bombers he claimed were trained at the school. 2 of them have no connection to the school whatsoever, and the 3rd doesn't exist in any intelligence database." Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed immediately by anger. "So you let Harrison order me to kill an innocent man just to build your case against him?" Morrison's expression grew serious. "Sergeant Chen, we had every confidence that you would make the right decision when the moment came. Your record shows consistent concern for civilian casualties, exceptional judgment under pressure, and unwavering moral integrity. We believed you would refuse the order, and we were prepared to intervene if necessary. But what if I had taken the shot? What if I had killed Dr. Mahmoud and those students? Then Harrison would be facing murder charges instead of just falsifying intelligence," Crawford said quietly. "And you would be facing the consequences of following an illegal order. But based on everything we knew about you, we believed that scenario was extremely unlikely." Rodriguez spoke up for the first time. "Maya, they're right. I've watched you agonize over every shock you've taken, seen you go to extraordinary lengths to minimize civilian casualties. There was never any real doubt about what you would do when faced with an order to kill innocent children." Maya sat down heavily on a nearby rock, trying to process the implications of what she was hearing. Her career hadn't ended today. It had been saved by her own moral integrity. But the revelation that she had been manipulated, even for good reasons, left her feeling hollow and used. "What happens to Harrison?" she asked. Morrison's expression hardened. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison will face court-martial for falsifying intelligence, conspiracy to commit murder, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Ms. Crawford's investigation has uncovered at least 6 other instances where he manipulated intelligence to justify questionable operations. Some of those operations resulted in the deaths of innocent civilians. And what happens to me? Officially, you will receive a commendation for refusing to carry out an illegal order and for preventing the deaths of innocent civilians. Morrison sighed. Unofficially, you've demonstrated exactly the kind of moral courage and independent thinking that the military needs more of. I'm recommending you for promotion to Staff Sergeant and transfer to a Special Operations Unit that could better utilize your unique skills. Maya looked down at the school building in the valley below, where Dr. Mahmoud was still teaching his students, still completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded around him. Sir, with respect, I'm not sure I want a promotion. I'm not sure I want to be a sniper anymore, because of what happened today. Because of everything that's happened over the past 5 years, I became a sniper to protect people, to save lives. But I've spent so much time looking at the world through a rifle scope that I'm not sure I remember how to see it any other way. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. Sergeant Chen, may I ask you something personal? Yes, sir. What would your grandmother tell you to do right now? Maya was startled by the question. Sir, I've read your file. I know about your grandmother's influence on your life, about the lessons she taught you regarding finding silence in chaos. What would she tell you to do? Maya touched the jade Buddha hanging from her neck, feeling its familiar weight and smoothness. She closed her eyes and tried to hear Popo's voice, tried to find the wisdom that had guided her through every major decision of her adult life. She would tell me to listen to the silence between the sounds, Maya said quietly. To find clarity in the space between heartbeats. To remember that strength and gentleness can coexist, that protecting people sometimes means putting down weapons instead of picking them up. And what does that silence tell you now? Maya opened her eyes and looked again at the school building, at Dr. Mahmoud and his students engaged in the ancient act of learning and teaching. She thought about Ahmed and Fatima running across a marketplace, about the ripples spreading outward from every action, about the kind of person she wanted to be when no one was watching except herself. It tells me that there are different ways to protect people, she said. That maybe I've learned everything I need to know about ending lives, and now I need to learn about saving them in other ways. Morrison smiled. What did you do before you joined the military, Sergeant Chen? I was going to study engineering at UC Berkeley. My father wanted me to become a mathematics professor like him. Mathematics, Morrison mused. Like Dr. Mahmoud. Down there, Maya nodded, understanding the implication. You think I should consider teaching? I think you should consider whatever calls to you, Morrison replied. You've served your country with honor and distinction. You've proven your courage under fire and your commitment to protecting innocent life. Whether you continue that service in uniform or in some other capacity is entirely up to you. Crawford closed her folder and prepared to leave. Sergeant Chen, there's one more thing you should know. Dr. Mahmoud asked us to pass along a message when we told him what had happened today. He knows? We had to brief him for security reasons. He needed to understand why there had been military aircraft overhead and why his school had been targeted. He wanted to thank the unknown sniper who refused to follow an illegal order. Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. What did he say? Crawford smiled. He said that anyone brave enough to risk their career to protect children they'd never met would always be welcome at his school. He offered to teach you mathematics if you ever decide to pursue that engineering degree your father wanted you to get. That evening, Maya sat in her quarters writing another letter she would never send, this one addressed to her grandmother. She wrote about the impossible choice she had faced, about finding courage in the space between trigger pull and target acquisition, about discovering that sometimes the most important shot was the one you refused to take. She wrote about Dr. Mahmoud and his students, about Ahmed and Fatima, about all the lives that had been saved not by bullets flying true, but by bullets that remained unfired. She wrote about the weight of moral courage, about the cost of doing what's right when everyone around you is demanding that you do what's wrong. Most of all, she wrote about the future, about engineering classes and mathematics textbooks, about teaching children to build bridges instead of learning to destroy them, about finding new ways to protect people that didn't require looking at them through rifle scopes. When she finished the letter, Maya walked outside and looked up at the stars shining over the Afghan mountains. Somewhere in the valley below, Dr. Mahmoud was probably preparing lessons for tomorrow's classes, still believing in the power of education to change the world one student at a time. Somewhere else, Harrison was sitting in a detention cell, waiting to face the consequences of his crimes. Somewhere beyond that, Ahmed was studying to become a doctor, and Fatima was learning to read and write and dream of becoming a teacher. The ripples continued to spread, touching shores Maya could never see, but knowing they were there all the same. She had thrown her last stone as a sniper today, had fired her final shot in service of life rather than death. Tomorrow would bring new choices, new opportunities to protect and serve in ways that built rather than destroyed. Maya touched the jade Buddha one more time, feeling Popo's presence in the silence between her heartbeats, and began planning her journey home. 6 months later, Maya stood in a lecture hall at UC Berkeley, wearing civilian clothes for the first time in 5 years and carrying a backpack full of engineering textbooks instead of ammunition. The transition from Staff Sergeant Chen to Maya, the undergraduate, had been more difficult than she had anticipated, but every day brought small victories and unexpected moments of grace. Her father had cried when she called to tell him she was coming home to finish her degree. Her mother had immediately begun planning elaborate homecoming dinners featuring all of Maya's favorite foods from childhood. But it was the letter from Dr. Mahmoud that had sealed her decision to leave the military and pursue the education her family had always wanted for her. "Dear Sergeant Chen," the letter had read, "I understand you are considering returning to your studies. As someone who has dedicated his life to education, I want you to know that there is no higher calling than learning and teaching. You have already proven your courage on the battlefield. Now you have the opportunity to prove it in the classroom, in the laboratory, in all the places where knowledge is born and shared. The world needs engineers who understand the value of life, who have seen what happens when human ingenuity is used for destruction instead of creation. Please consider my school always open to you, should you ever wish to see what our students have accomplished." Maya had framed that letter and hung it on the wall of her small apartment near campus, along with photographs of Ahmed and Fatima that their father had sent through Red Cross channels. The children were thriving. Ahmed was excelling in his science classes and still dreamed of becoming a doctor, while Fatima had learned to read and write in 3 languages and wanted to become a teacher like Dr. Mahmoud. The adjustment to civilian life had its challenges. Maya sometimes woke at 0500 hours out of habit, reaching for weapons that were no longer there. She startled at loud noises, fought the urge to scan rooftops for sniper positions, found herself calculating fields of fire and escape routes in perfectly safe environments like grocery stores and movie theaters. But she also discovered joys she had forgotten existed. The simple pleasure of walking into a classroom where the only target was ignorance, where success was measured in understanding rather than confirmed kills. The satisfaction of working through complex mathematical equations that built bridges instead of calculated ballistic trajectories. The profound peace of falling asleep without wondering if tonight would be the night she was called to end someone's life. Her professors and fellow students knew she was a veteran, but Maya rarely spoke about her military service. When asked about her experience, she usually deflected with vague references to engineering support and logistics coordination. Only her advisor, Dr. Patricia Huang, knew the full truth about Maya's background, and she had become an unexpected mentor and friend. "You carry yourself differently than other students," Dr. Huang had observed during one of their weekly meetings. "There's a weight to your decisions, a precision in your thinking that suggests you've faced consequences more serious than bad grades." Maya had eventually told Dr. Huang about her service as a sniper, about the shots taken and the shot refused, about the choice that had ended her military career and begun her journey toward a different kind of service. Dr. Huang had listened, without judgment, asking thoughtful questions about the parallels between precision shooting and precision engineering. "Both require understanding systems," Dr. Huang had said. "Both demand attention to detail that can mean the difference between success and catastrophe. But one system is designed to destroy while the other is designed to create. You've spent 5 years mastering destruction. Now you get to spend the rest of your life mastering creation." Maya threw herself into her studies with the same intensity she had once brought to military training. She took extra courses in structural engineering, fascinated by the challenge of designing buildings that could withstand earthquakes and hurricanes. And the passage of time. She studied materials science, learning how different elements could be combined to create structures stronger than their individual components. Most importantly, she began to see connections between her military experience and her engineering studies. The same mathematical principles that had helped her calculate bullet trajectories could be applied to designing suspension bridges. The patience and precision that had made her an exceptional sniper translated perfectly to laboratory work and complex problem solving. But it was in her International Development Engineering class that Maya found her true calling. Professor Williams, a different Williams than the sergeant who had helped her investigate, Harrison assigned a project designing infrastructure for refugee camps in conflict zones. Maya's group was tasked with creating a water purification system for a camp in Jordan housing Syrian refugees. As Maya researched the project, she discovered that clean water wasn't just an engineering challenge, it was a security issue, a health issue, a human rights issue that affected every aspect of camp life. Children missed school because they were sick from contaminated water. Women risked assault when they had to travel long distances to find clean sources. Entire families were trapped in cycles of poverty and illness because basic infrastructure needs weren't being met. Maya designed a solar-powered water purification system that could serve 5,000 people while requiring minimal maintenance and using locally available materials for repairs. But more than that, she designed a system that could be built and maintained by the refugees themselves, providing not just clean water but also technical training and employment opportunities. Her professor was so impressed with the design that he submitted it to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. 3 months later, Maya received a call that changed her life again. "Miss Chen," the voice on the phone said, "this is David Martinez from UNHCR Engineering Services. We've reviewed your water purification design, and we'd like to discuss implementing it in our Jordan operations. Would you be interested in spending your summer break working with our field team to test and refine the system?" Maya found herself on a plane to Jordan 2 weeks later, carrying her engineering notebooks instead of weapons, her slide rule instead of a rifle scope. The Zatari refugee camp was home to 80,000 Syrian refugees, a temporary city that had become permanent through the simple persistence of human suffering. Walking through the camp, Maya was struck by the resilience and ingenuity of the residents. Despite having lost everything, homes, businesses, family members, entire ways of life, they had created schools and shops and community centers out of UN tents and donated materials. Children played soccer with balls made from plastic bags and rubber bands. Women grew gardens in old water containers. Men used salvaged electronics to repair phones and radios, but the water situation was desperate. The existing purification system could barely keep up with demand, and breakdowns meant entire sections of the camp went without clean water for days at a time. Maya spent her first week in Jordan simply observing, understanding the systems, failures, and the community's needs. Her solar-powered design worked better than expected. The modular construction allowed for easy maintenance and expansion. The employment training program gave refugees valuable skills while reducing operational costs. Most importantly, the system gave people ownership over their own water security, reducing dependence on external aid and building community capacity. But it was the people Maya worked with who truly changed her perspective on service and purpose. Dr. Amara Hassan, a Syrian engineer who had fled Damascus with her family, became Maya's closest collaborator and friend. Before the war, Dr. Hassan had designed hospitals and schools throughout Syria. Now she was using her skills to build hope out of desperation, one water pump at a time. "You understand something that many aid workers do not," Dr. Hassan told Maya one evening as they watched the sunset over the camp. "You understand that people need dignity as much as they need clean water. Your design doesn't just solve a technical problem, it respects our ability to solve problems ourselves." Maya also worked with Ahmad, a teenage refugee who reminded her painfully of the Ahmad she had protected in Afghanistan. This Ahmad had lost both parents in the bombing of Aleppo, but he threw himself into learning water system maintenance with the same determination Maya had once brought to sniper training. "When I return to Syria," Ahmad told her, "I will use these skills to help rebuild my city. Water is life, and life must return to Syria someday." By the end of the summer, Maya's water purification system was serving 15,000 refugees across 3 camps, with plans for expansion to additional sites. But more than that, the project had trained 47 refugees in water system maintenance and management, creating a sustainable model that could continue long after Maya returned to her studies. The success in Jordan led to other opportunities. Maya spent the following summer in Kenya, working on irrigation systems for drought-affected communities. The summer after that brought her to Haiti, where she helped design earthquake-resistant schools that could serve as emergency shelters during hurricane season. Each project taught her new lessons about the intersection of engineering and human dignity, about the ways technical solutions could either empower communities or perpetuate dependence. Maya learned to design not just for efficiency and durability, but for local ownership and cultural appropriateness. She also learned that her military experience, rather than being something to overcome, was actually valuable preparation for humanitarian work. The discipline and precision that had made her an effective sniper translated perfectly to engineering work in challenging environments. Her ability to remain calm under pressure, to make critical decisions quickly, to work effectively with diverse teams, all skills honed through military service, made her exceptionally effective in the field. But perhaps most importantly, Maya discovered that the same moral courage that had led her to refuse an illegal order could guide her civilian career as well. When a UN contractor tried to pressure her to approve substandard materials for a school construction project in Kenya, Maya refused and reported the attempted corruption. When a government official in Haiti suggested that earthquake safety standards could be relaxed to save money, Maya threatened to withdraw from the project unless full safety protocols were followed. Dr. Wang noticed the change in Maya when she returned from her 3rd summer deployment. "You found your calling," she observed. "I can see it in the way you approach problems, in your confidence when presenting solutions. This is what you're meant to do." Maya nodded, feeling the truth of those words in her bones. "I spent 5 years learning to protect people by ending threats. Now I'm learning to protect people by building solutions. It feels like the work I was always meant to do." During her senior year, Maya received another letter from Dr. Mahmoud. The Panjshir Valley Girls' School had graduated its largest class ever, 23. young women who were going on to universities and technical colleges throughout Afghanistan. 3 of them were studying engineering, inspired by the story of the American soldier who had refused to destroy their school. "They know you chose education over destruction," Dr. Mahmoud wrote. "They know you risked everything to protect their right to learn. Now they are choosing to build rather than destroy, to create rather than fight. This is the true victory, not the battle you won that day, but the future you made possible." Maya graduated summa cum laude with a degree in civil engineering, a specialization in humanitarian engineering. Her senior thesis, Sustainable Infrastructure Development in Post-Conflict Communities, was published in the Journal of Engineering for International Development and became required reading in several graduate programs. But the moment that mattered most to Maya came during her graduation ceremony, when she saw her parents in the audience. Her father held a sign that read, "Proud of our engineer," while her mother wiped away tears of joy. Next to them sat Dr. Juan Rodriguez, who had flown in from his new assignment in Germany, and even General Morrison, who had taken a personal interest in Maya's post-military success. After the ceremony, Maya stood with her family and friends, holding her diploma and thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a frightened girl hiding under kitchen tables to a sniper who could make impossible shots to an engineer designing systems that would serve thousands of people, each step had built upon the last. Each choice had opened new possibilities. Rodriguez approached her as the crowd began to disperse. "So what's next, Maya? Going to change the world one water pump at a time?" Maya smiled, touching the jade Buddha that still hung around her neck. "Something like that. UNHCR offered me a position with their engineering team. I'll be based in Geneva, but I'll travel to wherever are needed: refugee camps, disaster zones, post-conflict communities, places where people need infrastructure built or rebuilt." "Sounds dangerous," Rodriguez observed. "Less dangerous than being a sniper," Maya replied, "and a lot more constructive." As Maya walked across campus for the last time as an undergraduate, she thought about all the people whose lives had intersected with hers over the past few years. Harrison was serving a 15-year sentence in military prison. The Apache crew she had saved from committing war crimes had been reassigned and retrained. Dr. Mahmoud continued teaching, his school now officially protected under international education agreements. Ahmed and Fatima had both written to congratulate Maya on her graduation. Ahmed was preparing for medical school entrance exams, while Fatima had started teaching younger children at her neighborhood school. Both carried forward the ripples of that day in the marketplace, when a sniper's refusal to fire had saved not just their lives but their futures. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Hassan in Jordan. "New project starting in Lebanon. Syrian refugees need water systems. Interested?" Maya typed back, "Always." The silence between sounds, Popo had taught her, was where you found the truth of what you must do. Maya had found her truth, not in the precision of ending lives, but in the precision of building systems that would sustain life for generations to come. Tomorrow she would start her new job, begin her new life as a humanitarian engineer. Tonight, she would celebrate with family and friends, grateful for the journey that had brought her from the bell towers of Afghanistan to the classrooms of Berkeley, to the refugee camps where she had learned that protection could take many forms. The ripples continued to spread, carrying hope and clean water and earthquake-resistant buildings to shores Maya could never see, but knowing they were there all the same. 3 years later, Geneva, Switzerland. Maya stood in the United Nations headquarters briefing room, presenting her latest project to a room full of diplomats, aid workers, and engineers from around the world. The PowerPoint behind her showed photographs of the completed water treatment facility in Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya, a system that now served 180,000 refugees and had reduced waterborne illness by 87% over the past 18 months. The key to sustainable humanitarian infrastructure, Maya explained to the assembled audience, is not just solving the immediate technical problem, but building local capacity for long-term maintenance and improvement. Every system we design must include comprehensive training programs, locally sourced materials wherever possible, and community ownership structures that ensure the infrastructure remains functional long after our teams have moved on. In the audience, Maya spotted Dr. Hassan, who had joined the UN team 6 months earlier after completing her engineering certification program. Also present was Ahmad, the same Ahmad she had worked with in Jordan, now 21 years old and serving as a community liaison for refugee infrastructure projects across the Middle East. After her presentation, Maya was approached by Secretary General Anderson, who had been following her work since the successful Jordan pilot project. "Ms. Chen," he said, "I have a proposition for you. We're establishing a new rapid response engineering team for crisis situations, natural disasters, conflict zones, anywhere people need critical infrastructure restored quickly. I'd like you to lead the team." Maya considered the offer carefully. Leading a UN rapid response team would mean more responsibility, more travel, more time away from the small apartment in Geneva that had become her first real home since leaving the military. But it would also mean the ability to scale her impact, to train other engineers in the principles of sustainable humanitarian infrastructure, to build systems that could reach millions instead of thousands. "I accept," she said, "but I have one condition. Dr. Hassan comes with me as deputy team leader, and Ahmad heads our community engagement division." Anderson smiled. "Done. When can you start?" "We're already started," Maya replied, thinking of the refugee camps and disaster zones around the world where clean water and safe buildings could mean the difference between hope and despair. 5 years later, northern Iraq. Maya crouched beside a water pump in a camp for internally displaced Yazidi families, teaching a group of teenage girls how to maintain the filtration system that served their section of the camp. The girls listened intently as she explained the importance of regular cleaning schedules and pH testing, taking careful notes in notebooks provided by UNESCO. One of the girls, Shirin, reminded Maya painfully of Fatima, the same bright intelligence, the same determined expression when faced with a complex problem. Shirin had been 12 when ISIS overran her village, forcing her family to flee with nothing but the clothes they wore. Now 16, she was the camp's unofficial water systems coordinator, having mastered every aspect of the purification process Maya's team had installed. "Miss Maya," Shirin said in careful English, "when I finish school, I want to study engineering like you. I want to build things that help people." Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she saw her own journey reflected. In a young person's dreams, "What kind of engineering?" she asked. "Water engineering. Clean water is life, you taught us this. I want to bring life to places that have lost it." That evening, Maya sat in her tent writing in the journal she had started keeping after leaving the military. She wrote about Shirin and the other young people she met in camps and disaster zones around the world, children who had lost everything but still dreamed of building better futures, not just for themselves but for their communities. She wrote about the letters she still received from Ahmed and Fatima in Afghanistan. Ahmed had graduated medical school and was working in a clinic in Kabul, providing free health care to families who couldn't afford treatment. Fatima had become a teacher, just as she'd dreamed, and was running a school for girls in a refugee camp outside the city. Most importantly, Maya wrote about the ripples, the ways her refusal to take that shot 8 years ago continued to spread outward in directions she could never have predicted. Dr. Mahmoud's school had inspired the creation of 17 similar schools across Afghanistan. Harrison's conviction had led to reforms in military intelligence, procedures that prevented other soldiers from being placed in similar impossible situations. Her water purification designs had been adopted by 8 organizations worldwide, serving over 800,000 people in 32 countries. But perhaps the most unexpected ripple had come through a letter that arrived at Maya's UN office the previous month, forwarded through multiple military channels before reaching her. "Dear Ms. Chen," the letter began, "you don't know me, but I know your story. My name is Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, and I'm currently deployed as a sniper with the 82nd Airborne. Last week, I was ordered to take a shot that would have killed 2 children along with my intended target. I remembered reading about your case in our ethics training, about the sniper who refused an illegal order and chose to protect civilians. Instead, because of your example, I found the courage to refuse the order. The mission was aborted, and investigation revealed that the intelligence was faulty. 2 children are alive today because you showed me that sometimes the most important shot is the one you don't take." Maya had read that letter dozens of times, each reading reinforcing her belief that individual choices, made in moments of moral clarity, could ripple outward in ways that touched lives across continents and decades. 7 years later, University of California, Berkeley. Maya stood at the podium in the same lecture hall where she had struggled through freshman calculus 8 years earlier, now delivering the keynote address for the university's first International Humanitarian Engineering Conference. The audience included students, professors, aid workers, and government officials from 43 countries, all gathered to discuss the intersection of engineering and human dignity. "Engineering is fundamentally about solving problems," Maya began, "but humanitarian engineering requires us to think beyond technical solutions to consider the human systems those solutions will serve. Every bridge we build, every water pump we install, every school we design carries with it the responsibility to enhance human dignity, not just human survival." In the front row, Maya could see her parents, both now retired and beaming with pride. Her father had become something of an expert on humanitarian engineering himself, auditing Maya's courses whenever she taught and asking detailed questions about the mathematical principles underlying water treatment processes. Dr. Wang sat nearby, having served as Maya's dissertation advisor when she returned to Berkeley to complete her PhD in civil engineering while working full-time for the UN. The dissertation, "Sustainable Infrastructure Development in Post-Conflict Communities, a Systems Approach to Human-Centered Design," had been published as a book and was now standard reading in humanitarian engineering programs worldwide. But the presence that meant the most to Maya was in the back of the lecture hall. Rodriguez, now a civilian contractor working with veterans organizations who had flown in specifically to hear her speak. After the presentation, he approached with his familiar easy smile. "Remember when you used to hide under kitchen tables during fireworks?" he asked, referencing a story Maya had told him years earlier. "I remember a scared kid who thought loud noises could hurt her," Maya replied. "Took me a while to learn that. The real danger wasn't in the noise, it was in the silence that followed, when you had to decide what kind of person you were going to be. And what kind of person did you decide to be?" Maya thought about the question as they walked across campus together. She thought about Shirin, now studying engineering at the University of Baghdad with a scholarship from Maya's foundation. She thought about Ahmed, who had just been promoted to regional director for UNHCR community engagement programs. She thought about Ahmed the doctor and Fatima the teacher, both still writing letters filled with updates about their work and dreams for Afghanistan's future. "I decided to be someone who builds instead of destroys," Maya said finally. "Someone who protects people by creating systems that make them safer, healthier, more able to pursue their own dreams." "Popo would be proud," Rodriguez observed. Maya touched the jade Buddha, still hanging around her neck after all these years. "I think she knew all along what I was meant to do. She just had to wait for me to figure it out." That evening, Maya returned to her childhood home in San Francisco's Chinatown for a dinner her mother had been planning for weeks. The apartment above the herb shop looked exactly as it had when Maya was a child, except for the addition of a wall covered with photographs from her humanitarian work smiling children next to new water pumps. Families moving into earthquake-resistant homes. Young women graduating from technical training programs. Her mother had prepared all of Maya's favorite dishes. But the centerpiece of the meal was a batch of Popo's dumplings, made from the handwritten recipe that had been passed down through 4 generations of women in Maya's family. Popo always said the secret ingredient was patience, her mother explained as they folded dumplings together in the tiny kitchen. You can't rush the dough. Can't force the filling. Everything has to be ready in its own time. Maya nodded, understanding the metaphor. Her own journey from frightened child and military sniper to humanitarian engineer had required patience with herself, with the world, with the slow process of figuring out how to use her skills in service of life rather than death. After dinner, Maya walked through the streets of Chinatown, past the herb shops and restaurants and temples where she had learned her first lessons about community and belonging. The sounds of the neighborhood, children playing, families talking, vendors calling out their wares, no longer frightened her. Instead, they reminded her of all the communities she had worked with over the years, all the places where people gathered together to build something better than what they had inherited. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Hassan, new earthquake in Turkey. UNHCR mobilizing response team, you available? Maya typed back, always. She hailed a taxi back to her hotel, already mentally shifting into crisis response mode. There would be emergency shelters needed, water systems to repair, infrastructure to rebuild. There would be families displaced from their homes, children separated from their schools, communities struggling to maintain hope in the aftermath of sudden disaster. But there would also be opportunities to build back better, to create systems more resilient than what had been destroyed, to train local engineers and community leaders who could carry the work forward long after. Maya's team moved on to the next crisis. 10 years later, Panjshir Valley, Afghanistan. Maya stood outside the building that had once been Dr. Mahmoud's school, now expanded into a full technical college offering degrees in engineering, computer science, and sustainable development. The bright blue doors had been repainted, and the small garden had grown into a campus courtyard filled with fruit trees and flowers. Dr. Mahmoud, now in his 70s but still teaching, emerged from the main building with a group of young women who were clearly his students. When he saw Maya, his face lit up with the same gentle warmth she remembered from watching him through her rifle scope 10 years earlier. Miss Chen, he said, approaching with arms extended for an embrace. Welcome to our school. I am so honored that you could come to visit us. Maya had finally accepted Dr. Mahmoud's long-standing invitation to visit Afghanistan during a brief period of relative stability in the region. She was traveling as part of a UNESCO team assessing educational infrastructure, but this stop was personal, a pilgrimage to the place where her life had changed direction. Dr. Mahmoud, she said, returning his embrace, thank you for having me. The campus is beautiful. Come, he said, let me show you what we have built. And please meet some of our engineering students. They are very excited to meet the American engineer who refused to destroy their school. Maya spent the afternoon touring the facilities, marveling at the computer lab equipped with solar panels and satellite internet, the chemistry laboratory, where students were developing water purification tablets, the workshop where young women were learning to design and build agricultural equipment. In the engineering classroom, she found herself face to face with a familiar equation on the blackboard, the same mathematical formula she had watched Dr. Mahmoud teach through her rifle scope 10 years earlier. But now the equation was being used to calculate load bearing capacity for earthquake-resistant construction, part of a lesson on building schools that could survive natural disasters. "This is Mariam," Dr. Mahmoud said, introducing Maya to a young woman in her early 20s. "She is our top engineering student and will be attending MIT next year for graduate studies." "Mariam, this is Ms. Chen." Mariam's eyes widened with recognition. "You are the sniper," she said quietly. "The one who saved our school." Maya nodded, feeling the weight of that moment even after all these years. "I'm the engineer now. The one who builds schools instead of targeting them." "Will you tell us about engineering for humanitarian purposes?" Mariam asked. "We want to learn how to use our education to help our people." Maya spent the next hour talking with the students about sustainable design, about the importance of community engagement in infrastructure projects, about the ways engineering could be used to build peace rather than wage war. She told them about her work in refugee camps and disaster zones, about the young engineers like Ahmad and Shirin, who were carrying forward the mission of building dignity through infrastructure. Most importantly, she told them about choices, about the moment when she had to decide what kind of person she wanted to be, and how that choice had opened up possibilities she never could have imagined. After her visit to the school, Maya made one final stop at a small cemetery on the outskirts of the valley. She placed a bouquet of sunflowers, the same flowers that had grown in the school garden 10 years earlier, on a simple grave marker bearing an inscription in Daryan English: Dr. Rashid Mahmoud, teacher and friend, 1950 to 2023. Dr. Mahmoud had passed away the previous winter, but not before seeing his school grow into a university that had graduated over 300 young women into careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. His funeral had been attended by students from across Afghanistan and around the world, all of them carrying forward his belief that education was the most powerful force for peace. Maya knelt beside the grave, touching the jade Buddha that still hung around her neck. "Thank you," she whispered, speaking to both Dr. Mahmoud and her grandmother, whose wisdom had guided her through every major decision of her adult life. "Thank you for showing me that protection can take many forms, that courage sometimes means refusing to act, that the most important battles are fought with books and blackboards instead of bullets and bombs." As the sun set over the Panjshir Valley, Maya thought about all the lives that had been touched by the events of that day 10 years ago. The students who were now teachers and doctors and engineers. The refugees who had clean water because Maya had learned to design sustainable purification systems. The communities that were safer because she had helped design earthquake-resistant buildings. But perhaps most importantly, she thought about the other snipers, the other soldiers, the other people in positions of authority who might face similar moral choices in the future. Through training programs and case studies and the simple power of example, Maya's story had become part of military ethics education, teaching young soldiers that moral courage sometimes required refusing orders, that protection sometimes meant putting down weapons instead of using them. The ripples continued to spread, carrying lessons about dignity and choice and the power of individual conscience to change the world one decision at a time. Maya had learned to find silence in chaos, strength in gentleness, and purpose in the space between destruction and creation. 15 years later, Geneva, Switzerland. Maya stood in her office at UN headquarters, looking out at Lake Geneva while video conferencing with engineering teams scattered across 6 continents. At 43, she had been promoted to Director of Global Infrastructure Development, overseeing humanitarian engineering projects that served over 15 million people worldwide. On her desk sat a photo from the previous month's graduation ceremony at the Dr. Rashid Mahmoud Technical College in Afghanistan, where Mariam had returned with her MIT PhD to become the school's new director. Next to it was a letter from Shirin, now working as a water systems engineer for Doctors Without Borders in Somalia. Ahmad's latest project report lay open beside both, detailing a refugee camp infrastructure program that had reduced waterborne Illness by 94% while training 2,000 community members in maintenance and repair. Maya's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Rodriguez Michael, her old sergeant, now running a non-profit organization that helped veterans transition to careers in humanitarian work. Maya, Rodriguez's voice was excited. I just got off the phone with the Nobel Committee. You need to sit down. Maya remained standing, looking out at the lake where swans glided peacefully across water, so clean you could drink it straight from the source. Mike, what are you talking about? They're announcing it tomorrow. The Nobel Peace Prize, it's yours. Maya, for your work in post-conflict infrastructure development and your contributions to preventing armed conflict through sustainable community development. Maya sat down heavily in her chair, staring at the photograph of Dr. Mahmoud's students. Mike, I think there's been a mistake. I'm an engineer, not a peace negotiator. I build water pumps in schools. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. That's exactly why you deserve it, Rodriguez replied. The committee said your work represents a new model for peace building, that by creating sustainable infrastructure in vulnerable communities, you've prevented conflicts before they could start. They specifically mentioned the ripple effects of your moral courage during your military service, how your refusal to follow an illegal order has become a case study in military ethics worldwide. After hanging up, Maya sat alone in her office as the magnitude of the recognition settled over her. She thought about Popo, who had died believing her granddaughter would find her calling in unexpected places. She thought about Dr. Mahmoud, who had dedicated his life to the simple faith that education could change the world. She thought about all the young people she had worked with over the years, all the communities that had taught her as much as she had taught them. Most of all, she thought about the moment 15 years ago when she had looked through a rifle scope at an innocent teacher and 3 students, when time had stopped and the world had narrowed to the space between trigger pressure and target acquisition, when she had found the courage to choose protection over destruction. The phone rang again. This time it was her mother, calling from San Francisco. Maya, her mother's voice was thick with tears. I just saw the news. Popo always said you would do something important with your life. She knew, even when you were hiding under the kitchen table, that you would find a way to protect people. I learned from the best teachers, Maya replied, touching the jade Buddha that had traveled with her from bell towers to lecture halls to refugee camps around the world. You and Popo taught me that strength and gentleness could coexist, that protection came in many forms. That evening, Maya walked along Lake Geneva, thinking about acceptance speeches and the platform the Nobel Prize would give her to advocate for humanitarian engineering on a global scale. But mostly she thought about the children, Ahmed and Fatima, now adults with children of their own. Shirin, bringing clean water to communities across Africa. Mariam, training the next generation of Afghan engineers. And all the other young people whose lives had been touched by infrastructure projects that prioritized human dignity alongside technical effectiveness. The ripples continued to spread, carrying hope and clean water and earthquake-resistant buildings to shores Maya could never see, but knowing they were there all the same. She had thrown her stones into still water 15 years ago when she refused to take a shot that would have killed innocent people. Now those ripples had reached the Nobel Committee, had touched communities on every continent, had inspired a new generation of engineers and peace builders who understood that the most important battles were fought with mathematics and materials. Science instead of weapons and warfare. Maya's phone buzzed with a final text of the day. From Ahmed in Jordan, saw the news. Dr. Mahmoud would be proud. So is everyone whose life you've touched. The water keeps flowing because you chose to build instead of destroy. She typed back. The work continues. The ripples keep spreading. As Maya walked back to her apartment, She passed a small cafe where a group of engineering students from the local university were studying together, their textbooks filled with equations for structural analysis and fluid dynamics. One of the students looked up as she passed, recognizing her from news coverage of her UN work. "Excuse me," the student called out in accented English. "Are you Maya Chen, the engineer?" Maya nodded, suddenly aware that she was no longer just an individual making personal choices, but a symbol of what was possible when moral courage guided technical expertise. "I'm studying to become a humanitarian engineer because of your work," the student continued. "I want to design infrastructure for refugee camps like you do. Will you tell me one thing? What's the most important lesson you've learned?" Maya thought for a moment, remembering her grandmother's teachings about silence and noise, about finding clarity in chaos. She thought about Dr. Mahmoud's faith in education, about Ahmed and Fatima running across a marketplace, about all the young people who had chosen to build rather than destroy. "The most important lesson," Maya said finally, "is that every choice we make sends ripples into the world. We can choose to send ripples of destruction or ripples of creation. The ripples look the same when they start, just small disturbances on a calm surface, but they carry completely different futures in their wake." The student nodded, writing down Maya's words in a notebook already filled with equations and diagrams. "One more thing," Maya added, touching the jade Buddha one final time. "Sometimes the most important shot is the one you don't take. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is refusing to act when everyone around you is demanding action. Trust your moral compass, even when it points in a direction that seems impossible to follow." As Maya climbed the stairs to her apartment, she could hear the sounds of Geneva at night, conversations in a dozen languages, the distant hum of humanitarian organizations working around the clock to address crises around the world, the quiet persistence of people dedicating their lives to building a better future. In her apartment, Maya opened her laptop and began writing her Nobel Prize acceptance speech, thinking about all the people she wanted to thank, all the communities that had taught her what it meant to serve, all the young engineers who would carry the work forward long after she was gone. But first, she wrote another letter she would never send, this one addressed to the girl who used to hide under kitchen tables when the world got too loud. "Dear Maya," she wrote, "you're going to be afraid for a long time. You're going to think that loud noises can hurt you, that chaos is something to be avoided, that silence is just the absence of sound. But you're going to learn that fear can be transformed into focus, that chaos contains opportunities for clarity, that silence is where you find the truth of what you must do. You're going to become a soldier, and you're going to learn to kill people from very far away. You're going to be very good at it, and it's going to save many lives. But the most important day of your military career will be the day you refuse to pull the trigger, the day you choose to protect instead of destroy. You're going to become an engineer, and you're going to learn to build systems that sustain life instead of ending it. You're going to work in places where hope is scarce and dignity is under constant assault, but you're going to help people reclaim both through the simple act of turning out a tap and having clean water flow out. Most importantly, you're going to learn that Po was right about the silence between sounds. That's where you'll find your calling, your purpose, your reason for being. In that silence, you'll discover that protection comes in many forms, that courage sometimes means refusing to act, that the most powerful weapons are the ones we choose not to use. The world is going to ask you to make impossible choices, to find solutions to problems that seem unsolvable, to have faith in futures that seem unreachable. You're going to discover that impossible is just another word for something that hasn't been done yet, that solutions emerge when you combine technical expertise with moral courage, that faith is built one choice at a time. Keep the jade Buddha close. Remember Po's teachings. Trust the silence between heartbeats. And never forget that the girl who was afraid of firecrackers grows up to be the woman who builds peace one water pump at a time. With love and admiration, Maya. When she finished the letter, Maya saved it in the same folder where she kept all the other letters she had written over the years, to Ahmed and Fatima, to Dr. Mahmoud, to the parts of herself that needed reassurance that the choices she had made were the right ones. Outside her window, Lake Geneva reflected the lights of a city dedicated to international cooperation and human rights. Somewhere across the world, water pumps Maya had designed were providing clean water to refugee families. Somewhere else, students in earthquake-resistant schools were learning about mathematics and science and the possibility of building better futures. The ripples continued to spread, carrying hope and dignity and the revolutionary idea that the most powerful force for peace was not weapons or threats, but the simple act of ensuring that every human being had access to clean water, safe shelter, and the opportunity to learn. Maya touched the jade Buddha one final time, feeling Popo's presence in the silence between her heartbeats, and began writing her acceptance speech for a prize that recognized her for learning to build instead of destroy, to protect instead of threaten, to find peace in the space between trigger pressure and target acquisition.